kind of bringing together a few different talks. So, I mean, I guess we'll see how it goes. So what's in the attic? Identifying and caring for home archival photograph collections. So what we want to keep in mind today is we're going to keep it pretty simple. I have some notes in front of me, so if I look like I'm looking down, I am. Like I said, we're bringing together a few talks, so we're trying this one out for the first time, actually, and we'll see how it goes. But I don't want to forget anything. So I have, as the introduction stated, I have a master's degree in history and a master's degree in photographic preservation and collections management. So I specialize in caring for photographs in museums, but I have a collection at home as well. And sort of in between those two master's degrees of history and photo preservation, I became really drawn to photographs of the First World War. And I love learning the origins of how those photographs came to be made, but I'm also obviously interested in the materiality of the photographs because I want to know how to take care of them at work and at home. Let's see, we can advance our slide here. There we go. Okay, so these are some photographs from my own collection. These are actually First World War photo postcards that were distributed by the Daily Mirror. This is one of my favorite photos of all time. It's actually a British official First World War photograph. I was doing my master's thesis at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, and they had this photo in their collection as well. And I was blown away by just how beautiful I thought it was. There's this incredible depth of field that we get, which maybe we don't think that you could get that with a First World War era camera, but of course you certainly can. And I was very excited to find another copy of the same print on eBay. So I bought it. And so that what that really reminds us is that although official photographers took photographs during the First World War because they were hired by government or military authorities, so they created the set of negatives, but those negatives were reproduced over and over again during the war for a variety of reasons, which means there's so many variant prints from the same negatives that are just kicking around. And so they have made their way into private and public collections. And so this slide is just showing us, again, how might war photographs exist in our collection. So we have prints, lantern slides. We see a photograph of an exhibition. So they were put on exhibition during the war. And then so prints were sold after that. You could order a print if you had seen it at an exhibition. We also have wartime illustrated magazines. And on the bottom here, we have these teeny tiny little prints. So we see them in photographic albums and scrapbooks. But today we're going to talk a lot more about just the silver gelatin print, so the black and white photograph, not so much for how to care for newspapers or even lantern slides, actually, although we can talk about that. We also see photographic postcards. Just up the top is a book of postcards that was sold commercially during the war. And stereograph cards. So these are like the stereograph card in this case and the real photo postcard. Those are the photographic objects that we're going to be talking about today in terms of care and preservation. So we're talking about collections of First World War photographs, and that can mean a collection that exists in your home or in a museum where maybe you work or you volunteer. We're going to keep everything very beginner level today and very simple. And collection could mean one or two photographs, or it could mean more than that. Or maybe you're interested in the subject. And what I would really want to express to you today is that if you're interested in First World War photographs and you think you'd like to start collecting them, or you have a few and you'd like to collect more, I think this is a really good beginner level era of photography. So it doesn't have to be complicated. And so a lot of what we're talking about in terms of care and handling First World War photographs, the materials are very similar if we're looking at from approximately, say, 1900 to the 1950s in terms of black and white photographs. And so when we first planned this talk, I planned it out with my friend Melissa Wing, who's on the board, and I said I was going to use photographs from the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada Museum and Archives, and we will see some of their photos. But then I was looking at the Royal BC Archives, as well as the University of Victoria Special Collection. So we're going to see some of their photos today because they have amazing stuff. I was a very big fan of the Eleanor June Parker font, which you can find on the Royal BC Archives website. She was a First World War nurse and just has these beautiful photos that you'll definitely want to go check out. So if you just go to the Royal BC Archives website and search Eleanor June Parker, you'll find her stuff. So I've been talking about this idea of the black and white photograph, and there's sort of what we want to know about that is the technical word for it is a gelatin silver print. And to make things really complicated, there's two kinds of gelatin silver prints or more, but the two common ones are called either printing out paper or developing out paper, or POP or DOP. And I don't want to bog you down with stuff, but I will say that at the end of this workshop today, everyone who signed up by email to watch with us live, Melissa is going to send you a PDF of what I would have given you if you came and did this workshop with me where I work at the Mackey Lake House in Coldstream, British Columbia. We have a little PDF that you can take away. So there's going to be some different resources in there in terms of care and handling for a variety of collections. And there's a few resources on identification of photographs, including one from the Getty, and that's going to talk about the different kinds of gelatin silver printing. So just like let it leave your mind and don't get bogged down in this because again, we're going to keep it simple. But so just, I mean, if we wanted to get into it, it's developing out DOP, gelatin silver prints from the early decades of the 20th century, and they're all kind of roughly the same. That's all we're going to say about that. But another thing I want to talk about is the fact that we're talking about photographic objects. So when we're looking at photographs in this type of arena, like we're doing this over Zoom, we think about photographs as images. But if you have a collection at home or you work in a museum, you know that photographs are prints that you can pick up. It's an object. You can look at the front of it, the back of it. It takes up space in your collection. And so that's what we really want to think about with photographs is that it needs a certain kind of care, yes, but also it has sort of this amazing lived history. And it has a social meaning, right? So photographs, they meant something. So this photograph meant something to Eleanor June Parker, and that meaning has shifted as it's gone into a public collection. And so the objectness of it there's all these layers, and I think that's really fascinating. So that's not really to do with the care and handling aspect of it, but we do want to remember that it is an object. It has a human story, and that could be really fascinating. And that might be an entry point that makes you want to collect photographs. So we have photos, we know they have an objectness, and we know that the objectness can relate to the resonance of that object, that we hold for it as viewers or as owners of the photograph. And we know that there's a type of care that the photograph requires. So we're going to talk about First World War photographs. So like I said, we're going to look at photos from the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada Museum and Archives, from the Royal BC Archives, and the University of Victoria Special Collections. I'm also going to show you, I have like a bunch of stuff sitting next to me on my desk to just show and tell. And so in terms of context of First World War photographs, I mentioned that there's something called an official photograph. And so for the case of Canada, during the First World War, all Canadians were asked not to, as of 1915, not to have cameras if you're an active soldier on the Western Front. Please don't take any photos. Please don't send any photos home. And that was the case for the British as well. And so, of course, there are newspapers on the home front that would really like to tell the news of the war and would really like to illustrate the news with photography. And so this is a real problem. If no one's allowed to take photographs on the Western Front, photojournalists are not allowed either, because military and government authorities are very afraid of what photographs could reveal in terms of logistics, its effect on morale and public opinion. So this is locked down from 1914 till 1915. But the Canadian public would really like to see some photographs, particularly as the battles become more intense. The Canadian contribution to war becomes more significant over time. And so there's this sort of feeling that the Canadian public is owed legitimate visual news. So as a result, and to make a very long story short, one person, Lord Beaverbrook, he's not Lord Beaverbrook until 1917, Sir Max Aitken, but we'll call him Beaverbrook. he starts an organization called the Canadian War Records Office. And in early 1916, after what he calls a stiff fight with the authorities at the War Office, he finally gets permission to hire some official photographers. And so that's where we get this idea of the official photograph. Let's see, I'm just gonna, oh, okay, we're gonna talk a little bit more about official photography in a minute. So that's one kind of photograph, though, and we can split First World War photographs into a few different genres, if you will. So this is another official First World War photograph that we're looking at. This is a British one, but it's just to give you an idea of the size. So most official war photographic prints that you're going to come across, if you're wondering what kind of photo do I even have, they're usually about 6 by 8 inches. So that's an example of one. And then, so this is our next genre, if you will, is the unofficial war photograph. They're also black and white photos, usually. They're usually printed from roll film. The prints are relatively small, comparatively. I wish I had some in front of me, but I don't. But I'm gonna guess that they're more like 2 by 3 inches instead of 6 by 8. And they include photographs taken by everyday officers, soldiers, and nurses. So again, the official war photograph, if I can go back, which I probably, oh, no, apparently I can't. The official war photograph, it's not usually made on film, it's made on a sheet of glass. I have one, this is one that I made. So it's like a 4 by 5 inch sheet of glass. Official war photos were made on these. Unofficial would be made with the camera we're looking at right now, the Vest Pocket Kodak, on roll film. So the quality is going to be a little bit different as well, usually. As it says on the slide, it's estimated that 1 in 5 Allied officers carried a private camera like this. How many people own their own camera today? I lifted this slide from a class I did with some grade 10s, because of course I know you probably all own cameras, and you know that cameras are relatively novel, whereas a 15-year-old wouldn't know that. So we have our unofficial photos, we have our official photos. And then we have what I've thought about in a different way as portraiture. So this could be studio portraits, or if we're somewhere perhaps away from the Western Front, so somewhere in Britain or in Canada, regimental portraits that are taken by a studio photographer. So that's a little bit different. It's not like a battle photograph taken on the Western Front. And then here we have this beautiful studio portrait of our girl, Eleanor June Parker. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. And we can see, like, again, the objectness of it, right? It's got some tape on it. Her name is written on it. But it's a little bit different, again, from the other types of photographs, where this is a portrait. It's not a snapshot that she took on the Western Front. We also have tactical photographs, so aerial photos or even battlefield panoramas, which were taken for, of course, observing the battlefield. So all of the photographs, they were made for different purposes, and sometimes they will exhibit different types of materiality. This is just the back of that aerial photograph. So in the case of Canadian official war photos, we want to remember that these are photographs commissioned by Canada's military and government authorities. And by official photographers hired for the purposes of building up a body of images to go to the archives after the war, to be used in newspapers, to be put on exhibition, to be sold for commercial purposes like postcards and lantern slides. But most importantly, these are photographs that were subject to censorship. And that's very different from unofficial war photographs that a soldier or a nurse will have taken. So I did say that as of 1915, no one was allowed to have a camera or take photos on the Western Front. But I also said that 1 in 5 Allied officers had a private camera. So of course people were breaking the rules, and that's important to know. And so because there's so many different types of photos, it's common to find official war photographs and collections around the world, as we said. And as I said at the beginning, numerous photographic prints were made from each negative to sell to different press agencies or just to individuals. So this is the slide I was looking for earlier. Canada's official First World War photographers, they were Harry Noble, William Ivor Castle, and William Ryder Ryder. None of these official photographers really worked at the same time as each other. Harry Noble worked from April until August of 1916, where we know that what we would call PTSD, that really kind of, I want to say, knocked him out of the field. He had to apply for medical leave several times in a row until finally he was sent back to Canada. He was replaced by a newspaper photographer named William Ivor Castle, who was British and worked for the Daily Mirror in London. And so Ivor Castle worked from August of 1916 until about June or July of 1917. And then he remained in title as Canada's official First World War photographer, but he, from what we can tell from documentary evidence, he mostly spent the rest of the year of 1917 from June until the end of the year in London. And so he was replaced by William Ryder, who was also an official press photographer, also from the Daily Mirror, and he remained on the Western Front from the summer of 1917 until the end of the war in November of 1918. So this all relates to if you can find a date. So we're going to get to how to identify if you own official war photographs in your home collection. If you can find a date on it, then you can match it up to one of these photographers. So April to August 1916, Harry Noble. August of 1916 to about June or July of 1917, William Ivor Castle. And then summer of 1917 all the way to the end of the war, William Ryder. You can also find some of that information on Library and Archives Canada as well. So as I said, they were hired by the Canadian War Records Office, a government organization tasked with hiring photographers and organizing photographs. And so there's our friend Sir Max Aitken, and after 1917, Lord Beaverbrook. So he was the real mover and shaker behind the official war photography program. All right, so I'm just checking my notes here. So how can we tell if we have an official war photograph or if it's an unofficial one? So let's see. Oh, we're going. Okay, so if we look at this photo, we'll see on the front corner it says O.2201, and on the other corner it says Copyright Canada 1919. So the O tells us that it's an official photograph. Every Canadian official photograph was given a negative number with an O and then a number, starting from O.1 all the way to O4000 and something. So if you happen to have a photograph in your collection that looks like this, there's a very good chance that it is Canadian official. After the war, all of the negatives were brought back to Canada by William Ryder. He brought them to Ottawa, where they went to the public archives, but they were so popular that different firms continued printing them for individual buyers. And so the ones that were printed in Canada were embossed with this Copyright Canada 1919. And so again, we have our counterpart to that, the unofficial photograph. So in the case of unofficial photographs, we know that owning private cameras while in active service was banned as of 1915, and that kind of tells us something about these photos. They weren't subject to censorship in the same way, and we know that, although in the case of Eleanor June Parker, most of hers are dated, I think, 1915, so she probably wasn't quite breaking the rules. But there's something to that, somebody that was willing to take the risk of taking photographs, even though they technically weren't supposed to. And the subjects that they're documenting, therefore, could show us something a little bit different than an official war photograph. So they're very interesting in that regard. So if we compare unofficial to official photographs in terms of their materiality, like I said before, official war photographs were taken on 4x5 view cameras on glass plate negatives. And so what that means is that it's a really high level of detail for the time. So those are professional cameras, and they're generally very good quality. Whereas, although I couldn't find an example of this necessarily, a lot of the unofficial photographs that I came across online were really quite beautiful, actually, and pretty sharp. But technically, an unofficial war photograph taken on a small kind of consumer grade camera could be slightly less good quality. So how are they going to both stand up in the long run, though? That's going to really come down to who developed the photograph and did they do a flawless job of it. So what's really interesting in the case of the official war photograph is that you could have one negative and we could have two different prints from it that were made by two different people. And one of them could have done the whole printing process absolutely flawlessly. And that print's going to stand up for a really long time. And the other person who made a print from it, although it's a variant print from the exact same negative, because a different person has printed it, it might actually not be as good quality and it might not stand up as well. And then we know both of those photographs have gone into different collections and the care that they have received will be different. And that's really going to determine how long that photograph is going to survive in the long run. I think that's really interesting if you're a giant nerd like me. But again, what I want to express in the spirit, again, of keeping everything simple and why I said that First World War era gelatin silver prints are a really great way to start collecting historic photographs is that they are remarkably stable compared to other photographic materials. So for example, color photographs require a lot more care than black and white photographs do. Older photographs from the 19th century are going to require a lot more care than your just black and white gelatin silver print. So that's really great for us. All right, so here we have that example again of identifying an official war photograph in your collection. So we have it circled, the negative number on the bottom corner. This one's O.1469, and then we have a little highlight or a sort of a detail of how it's been embossed. So that's very simple ways to identify if it's an official Canadian photograph that you might have in your collection. Some Canadian official photographs were also numbered with M's, but you're far less likely to come across them. And those are photographs that were official, but they were taken by a home front photographer in England. In my years of kind of scouting eBay in different places, I've come across far fewer home front Canadian official photographs. But if you do find one that says M, it could mean that. So these are British official First World War photographs. And so I've included these as well because British official also have an alphanumeric system for identifying the photograph. And they didn't use all O for theirs. Canada did. And England used a variety of different letters. And that's because they had a lot more photographers all working at the same time. So if you come across photos, you might find A, C, D, K, N, L, etc. And so that will all mean different photographers. So A means Royal Engineers, C means it was taken by Ernest Brooks, D means John Warwick Brooke. And then that's when I stop remembering who's who, but the other letters mean photographers like Thomas Keith Aitken or David McClellan. But to throw a wrench in all of this, after the First World War, the British official war photographs were all turned into the first collection of the Imperial War Museum. And the British Ministry of Information invited those photographers back to reorganize all of their wartime photographs and rewrite some of the captions because they were a little bit vague so that they wouldn't show too many details. And then over the years between the war and now, the Imperial War Museum is constantly cleaning up the language so it's not quite so racist or prejudiced against Germans all the time. And therefore, those original captions haven't been preserved by the Imperial War Museum, which can be a real bummer if you come across a photograph like I have. I like to collect British ones. These captions no longer match, and neither do the numbers. So when the Imperial War Museum reorganized all their photographs, they also renumbered them all. And now they all have numbers that start with the letter Q. And so unfortunately, that hasn't been preserved by them. So official war photographs, no matter what country they come from, they do have some information on the back as well. And so again, it's this idea of the objectness of the photograph. It has these great little treasures on the back as well. And so if you meet a photo historian, they're going to immediately say, that's a nice photo, and then they're going to turn it around. So this gives us that negative number, O.1647. It tells us it's a Canadian official photograph from the Western Front. And it's giving us the title that was given at the time, Canadians Risking a Shortcut Through a Recently Captured Village. And then it's showing us which press agency got to use it, or if there was more than one. So Official Press Bureau passed for publication abroad, so it's been censored. And it's saying if you use this photograph, you need to give credit to the Central News Agency. So that's the press agency that got the rights to this photograph. So lots of it, again, very simple. It's telling us what it is. This is a great example from the University of Victoria Special Collections. They have this wonderful collection called Victoria to Vimy First World War Collection. So just a little tip, if you go to the university, you can just Google this, University of Victoria Special Collections Vault. The vault is going to take you to see everything that's been digitized, and they have several First World War collections that you can just go look at, and they're so beautiful. They've been beautifully scanned, and they're freely available for you to view online for your own educational purposes. But I love this one because it really throws a wrench in what I always like to talk about in terms of the size of official war photographs. So this is a page from Archie Wills's photograph album, and the page itself is 17 by 25 centimeters. So sort of 2/3 of a ruler by most of a ruler. And so the photographs, I know they're official because I know enough official photographs to just know them by sight. And so there's these little prints. And so if I had received this, or if I had bought this, let's say, and it was in my collection, they didn't know that much about official war photographs, and somebody told me that official prints are always about 6 by 8 inches, I would have looked at this and said, well, these are too small, so I guess it's not official. So this is my little exception to the rule, that I guess sometimes you will find these little prints that are maybe about 1/4 of the size of an official print as it normally is. So if you think that you have an official print, and let's say it is glued into an album, and let's say that reverse image search doesn't exist on Google, but it does. One thing that you can do is go to Library and Archives Canada to their collection search. You'll want to click on Advanced Search, and then you want to type in this number that I supplied you with. It's 4532467. And that is the what Library and Archives Canada calls their MECAN numbers. So it's a word for a call number. And that's the call number for every single Canadian official O prefixed First World War photograph. So if it has an O number, it should be there. And so you would type that MECAN number in all these words, and then you could do a keyword search underneath that. And that should bring up the photograph that you own. And it will give you a little bit more information in terms of when it was taken. And then again, once you know when it was taken, you will be able to pair it up with the photographer. So I'll tell you one more time. Harry Noble is going to be April to August of 1916. Ivor Castle is going to be August 1916 to about June, July 1917. And then June, July 1917 to November 1918 is William Ryder Ryder. All right, and so if you think that you might have a British official First World War photograph, you can, and you have a Q number on it, so you can buy photos, prints to this day that will have a Q, so you know then that it's newer. It was made after the war. You can search those Q numbers on the Imperial War Museum website, but if you have an old print like I do that still has a number that's a C or D or something like that, you can actually go to the National Library of Scotland and search for it there, because they have preserved all of the original numbers. They haven't used the Q numbers for their collection. So they have a whole set of prints that are variants, so made from those negatives that live at the Imperial War Museum. So I think that's amazing to know that the National Library of Scotland has preserved a lot of the originality of those First World War photographs. So if you do that and you have come to the conclusion that your photograph is an unofficial, so taken by a soldier or a nurse or just a private citizen during the First World War, then you're very lucky because you own an original, unique object. There probably aren't variants of that object anywhere else in the world, but it does make it really difficult to find out more about your photo. The good news about that is that you can just Google things like Canadian First World War uniforms and fashion. And if you have any keywords about places or dates or battles, there's such a treasure trove out there. So we are lucky in that regard that we live in sort of this information age where whatever you can Google, you could find it. So there's a little bit to help you contextualize your photos. This one is, I like to talk about this photo. I bought it a couple of years ago. And so it's a British official First World War photo. And I bought it on eBay. I have it right here. And I was excited because it's a very famous image by John Warwick Brooke called The Battle of Pilcombe Ridge. So during the Battle of Passchendaele. And I think the eBay version of it was just like not very helpful in terms of what I was getting, because I opened the mail and I was like, what the heck? And I unfold it and it's this huge print. And I know that that's much bigger than an official war photograph normally would be. And so I look at the back and it's got a Q number. So I know it was printed after the war. And then I looked at it a little bit more and I realized how white the whites are and how black the blacks are. And so another little tip that I have for you is that optical brighteners were not added to photo printing paper until the 1950s, which means that it's very unusual, almost impossible to find a First World War era photograph that was printed during the First World War that's going to have really stark whites in it. So that just, those little things help you kind of date the photos that you have. And yeah, you would never find a print like this is two prints basically. And then so on the back, it does have this Q number, which I'm not sure if you can see it. It says Imperial War Museum Q5935. And it has this great stamp that tells me Sunday Telegraph, 8th of May, 1966 used. So I could potentially look up that issue of the Sunday Telegraph and see my photo printed in the newspaper. But again, it's just this example of once you kind of learn a little bit more about the materials, it can really tell you what the heck is going on with your photographs. So how do we take care of these? I always want to think of care and storage of photographs in terms of good, better, best. So there's always going to be the best case scenario, and it unfortunately costs some money to do that, and it doesn't have to be the case. Again, First World War era gelatin silver prints don't have to be that difficult to take care of. They're relatively stable, as I said, compared to other types of photographs. And so we can really think about sort of real life solutions in terms of how you could care for them. So I have some different sort of things here to show, but the first thing we want to talk about is the environment. So photographs like a certain type of environment. And when we're talking about a collection that lives in your house, your body likes a little bit of a different environment. So photographs like to be cool and dry, so around 18 to 21 degrees. They like about 30 to 50% relative humidity, although the low end of that would be ideal. And if that feels difficult to achieve in your house, like I don't know too many people that want an 18-degree house, it's a little chilly maybe. The best thing you can do, if you can, is to avoid huge fluctuations. And so we obviously see that with seasonal changes. So if you can avoid shocking your photographs with the seasons, that'd be great. But again, we're going to be realistic. So you want to do your best. The best way to store your photos is going to be sort of in an interior room in your house, probably in a closet. The attic isn't usually great because it's usually very hot and dry, and a basement isn't always great because it's usually going to be damper. So if you know that your basement is safe, maybe you have an upper closet you could put something in and it's cool but not damp, that could be okay. So the best thing we can do to store our photographs is to create something of a small microclimate. So if we store our photographs into archival folders, inside boxes or containers, and then inside a cabinet or a larger container in a closet, it's going to create something of a small microclimate so that it can stand up to any fluctuations that might come its way. And I'll show you some examples of some containers we can think about. You do want to clean the room regularly to avoid air pollutants. You want to do what you can to promote good air circulation. So, you know, having doors and that kind of thing open. If you wanted to, you could purchase a small dehumidifier for your room. They don't have to be super expensive, but just to kind of, if you cared about keeping your relative humidity at a certain amount. A lot of us obviously have air conditioning in our homes, so that makes it easier to maintain a steady temperature in our house. So those are just some basic tips. The number one thing I would recommend if you're preserving a collection at home on a budget is that, again, if we're going to create that idea of the microclimate, that means we're going to store our photograph in something. and then in a box, and then in a cabinet, or then in a container, something like that. The thing that I would invest in the most, if I had to invest in anything, is the container that's going to directly touch the photo. So what I mean by that is this is an archival or acid-free folder. And if you want to know more about what does archival mean or acid-free, that's going to be in the pamphlet or the little booklet that Melissa's going to send to you. In terms of what does it even mean to be acid-free, all of that is in there. So where I would spend my money is on the folders or the envelopes that are actually going to hug your photograph. And then you could spend a tiny bit less on the next thing that it's going to go into. So if you see behind me, I just have a plastic tub. That's where a lot of my photos live in at home, because of course, like the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes. So I think that's a tub I probably bought at Dollarama. If you want to spend a little bit more on a plastic tub, you can buy one that's BPA free from like a more high quality place to buy boxes like Staples. And then I would store that in a closet. Or if you have even just a spare filing cabinet at home, that's a great solution for storing your photographs, because it's powder coated steel, so it doesn't give off any gases, and it's to some very small degree a little bit fire safe. So that's sort of just like a decent solution. If you're interested, you can also, if you just search on YouTube, if you wanted to make your own boxes, that might sound daunting, but it doesn't have to. I searched this on YouTube before we got started today, and there's a ton of different videos that you can watch on how to make them yourself. And so another solution that's a really great one is Coroplast, so corrugated plastic. And so I love that as a material because you can actually just buy it at the hardware store. And so it's semi-waterproof for photographic collections. And you can make these boxes yourself. And you just watch a couple tutorials online, and all you need is, you know, a ruler and a pencil and a sharp knife, and you're good to go. These are fastened with screws, which isn't always, I don't know if you can see that. They're fastened with screws, but you can get plastic fasteners, or you can tie them together with cotton twill tape, which you can just buy at like Fabricland. And so that's a solution if you feel up to starting to build your own boxes for your photos. And so Coroplast it's just so much less expensive than buying archival corrugated board, which again, in the resources that Melissa will send out, it has a whole list of different suppliers that you can buy supplies from. There's also an Amazon list that I put together probably about a year or so ago that just collects a lot of different tools that you can buy if you want to. And not that I'm endorsing Amazon, and I get, like, I'm not an affiliate with them or anything, so I don't get any commission if you buy off that wish list. It's just to collect a lot of different items for you to take a look at. You can also buy small photo boxes. So this is called a Hollinger box, and it's like roughly the size of small photographic prints, like 4x6, not quite 4x6. And so that's just another solution. So you can buy these ready-made boxes. And they're a little bit of an investment, but they're going to preserve your photographs for a very long time, which is great. If you have larger prints, then you can buy one of these sort of more file size boxes. So a better solution than putting my photos in a folder and then a plastic tote would be photos in a folder, photos in a file sized box, and then into, let's say, a filing cabinet. As we know, photographs are light sensitive, so we do want to avoid exposing them to too much light, because it can have several causes, like making them brittle, making them fade, and making them yellow. And of course, those are all irreversible types of damage. So if we do want to display wartime era photographs in our home, we want to have photographs that are low UV emitting bulbs, so like LED. You want to rotate any photographs you might have on display. So if you could keep them up for just a few months at a time and then bring out other photos that you love. You can invest in UV filters on your frames, so that's a little bit more expensive solution. You can make facsimiles of your collection, so have it digitized and printed anywhere where you like to print photos. And you can try and keep the light low. So these are just some tools that I like to work with. And a little while ago, I think earlier in the spring, I did a takeover of the Friends of the BC Archives Instagram account. So you can hear me talk about all these different tools. But I will say, these are all ones that you can just buy on Amazon or wherever you like to buy supplies. So we see the cotton twill tape. You can just buy that at Fabricland. And like knife, you always want to work with a metal ruler if you're doing any kind of box making, because those knives are very sharp, and the metal ruler is basically the only thing that can stop them. So here we have just different types of enclosures and materials. So these are photographs that I worked with at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and they're in sort of a plastic material that's just another kind of solution. It's I don't even know what the specific plastic material it is, but it's something like an archival page protector, and they would fit into a 3-ring binder, or even better, an archival box that has a 3-ring system. So that's a great way to store photographs. Just a few other tips for care and handling of your photos. You can consider wearing gloves with them. I have a couple different kinds of gloves. There's like an age-old debate. Do you need to wear gloves with your photos? And if so, which kind should you wear? So we have cotton or nitrile. You can leave that up. It's up to you with your own collection. I don't wear gloves when I touch my own photographs. But if I did, I would use nitrile because I find it easier to feel the texture of the photo, where with cotton, you lose a lot of tactility in your fingers. You might actually rip your photo. You can consider getting a book cradle if you have any albums at home that you want to look at. If you don't want to buy a book cradle, I would just take clean bath towels even and roll them up. So there's definitely like creative solutions for all of these things just to take care of your stuff. You do want to label any enclosures. So if you have folders or envelopes that you put your photographs in, you want to always label them so you don't have to always open and close it, or pull the photo out to remind yourself what you're looking at. And you can consider digitizing your collection if you feel like that's within your skill set or within your budget to hire somebody else. And that's kind of all of my tips for today. So I think we can move to questions. I'm gonna see how I unshare my screen. Melissa, can you like take over?
Yeah, I can do this, I think. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, just where it says share, you can then end the share.
Okay, I can't see my mouse and I don't know why. Oh, but I see pause share, new share. We are so good at this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why my mouse doesn't show up.
Oh, can I end it?
That's it. Share.
Oh, I can end it, Carla.
Okay, perfect.
There we go. Okay. Hi everybody. I'm Melissa Wing. I am the communications coordinator for the Friends of BC Archives, and I will be running Q&A. So if you have a question and you want to type it in the chat, go for it. If you'd like to ask a question on camera, that is also completely okay. We just ask that you raise your hand, similar to what Laura is doing right now, and we'll get going. So if anyone has a question right off the bat, I will let Laura kick us off.
Thanks very much. Carla-Jean, this is a question about sort of cultural practices with regards to subjects of First World War photographs. I know so I'll just lower my hand too. I know during the early days of photography and the American Civil War, there were more, I would say, graphic images from the battlefield, and I wonder if during the First World War period that changed. Like, what have you seen with regards to subject matter that people might be interested in? Thanks.
You certainly can find graphic photographs of war, particularly if you find unofficial German war photographs. You'll see some really, really, graphic's not even the right word, but just sometimes shocking photographs. There's a historian named Joelle Bruyere. I'm going to write this in the chat. She has written a great article about comparing the censorship. So if you search Joelle Bruyere, like censorship between the French, British, and Germans, she talks a lot about that. You kind of will find every single subject under the sun, though, even for like if you're buying photographs anywhere, and they're official or unofficial. There's just a variety of subjects in terms of just sort of everyday life, but there is graphic battle scenes. And so although we know the photographs were censored, we also know that for the Canadians, they always knew that their photos had a home in the Public Archives of Canada. The British didn't always know that. It wasn't until 1917 that they were told about the establishment of this upcoming Imperial War Museum. So for the British, shooting in 1916 and 1917, the thought was, your photos are really only going to live as long as the news cycle, so you better make photos that are going to make it in the news, which means it can't be that graphic. And then after 1917, we see a lot more graphic subject matter and darker subject matter because those photographers knew that even if it didn't make it to the news, it has a life in the archives, and that's going to change what you choose to photograph. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you'll kind of find
Yeah.
a lot of different subjects.
Thank you.
All right, Kelsey, you can go next.
Hi, Carla-Jean.
Hi, Kelsey.
My question is, in my museum, a lot of the World War I photographs have been rolled up and they will not unroll.
Mhm.
Don't want to roll them flat and crack them. But even if they're rolled, like I'll unroll it, and even if it doesn't crack, it won't keep its shape, like it just wants to stay rolled. What can I do with those?
That's such a good question. I'm glad you asked me that because I just got, somebody gave me one. It's in my box here. And so I'm dealing with the same issue as you right now. Like, this is insane, right?
Exactly.
So you and I are going to have to talk about this together, and maybe we can do like an unrolling thing. So I've never done it myself, but I feel very confident, if I remember correctly, that the Canadian Conservation Institute, they should have instructions on how to relax photographs. And it's going to take a long time, right? Like, we can't be in a rush when we're doing that type of conservation treatment on an old and large scale photograph. So it's my understanding that it would be a very controlled type of introducing humidity to the photo in a way that's not going to shock it, but it's going to relax it. And so I'll have to find that and share it with you. But yes, so Canadian Conservation Institute, if you're looking at their CCI notes, they have basically everything under the sun for how to take care of anything in a museum. And so they should have some instructions on how to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Melissa, can I jump in here after Mary with a chat? I'll read out a chat question.
Oh, sure. I was just gonna read out Katie's chat question.
Okay, but let's.
yeah.
I'll let you drive, of course.
Okay. Yeah, so from the chat, we have a question from Katie Hardy. They're asking, what is the best way to make a copy of a photograph without actually causing any potential damage to the original?
Mm-hmm. So there's always a small risk when we're reproducing photographs. There's a small risk that we're going to do some damage, but we can definitely do our best. So of course we want to employ all of our good care and handling skills when we're reproducing a photograph. So let's say we're going to digitize it. So when we use a flatbed scanner with a photograph, of course it's applying light to it. So that's a risk. And so we can balance out our risk versus reward in that regard. So what I would do with that is I always try to do it right the first time. So I like to digitize my photographs by doing, I create a TIFF of at least 600 DPI, if not higher, depending on what kind of storage space you have. You can use, Kodak has like color checkers, and you can look this up. Just Google how to color correct using a color checker. And it's really simple. I use Photoshop to color correct my photographs, and that's just how we do it. So again, we want to make sure we have a nice clean workspace. There's not a bunch of stuff hanging around. I have my scanner. I have my color checker. If I was working in the museum, I'd be wearing gloves. I don't do that at home. And I'm only going to scan it once, and I'm going to do it right the first time. So it's only going to be exposed to light one time, and then it's going to go back into storage. Some places will have rules in terms of once it's scanned, how long is it going to sit in a dark box to give it a prescribed amount of dark time. And you'll find that sort of in a case-by-case scenario in different museums. But that's what I would do. And then from then on, you can make prints from your digitized copy and you can display those. And if people want to, if you're working in a museum and people want to come see that photo, you can offer them always the digitized surrogate first. And that's all of those things are going to reduce handling on your photograph.
Perfect. Now we have Mary with a question.
Hi, this is leaving the conservation side back to the World War I photographers. I'm sure you're familiar with G.H.E. Hudson, Carla-Jean, and his photos. He was a World War I photographer, but would his role be taking pictures? He was skilled in developing, he was skilled in photoshopping of the day, or would he be working behind the scenes?
So not as an official photographer, so working behind the scenes. And we see a ton of photographers working in England. So the Canadian War Records Office had a huge staff of people who their only job is like darkroom tech and organizing and that kind of thing. Sometime, I think I want to say around 1916, the CWRO also established a darkroom actually in France so that it would be a lot quicker to get negatives developed and get them to a sensor and get them over the channel. So it became so quick that for in the case of the Battle of Vimy Ridge, that battle ended on April 16th and photographs were in the newspaper on April 6th. Sorry, the battle ended April 12th. We had photos in the news on April 16th. So they really, really sped up the process. And that would have been thanks to the very large and talented staff of people that were behind the photographer.
That makes sense. He was at the front from late in 1917 into 1918. And we have a controversy with a photo, someone saying that said this is a photo that he took too early for him to be there. But the family story is more or less that their relative stuck his head out of the trench and recognized Huddy Hudson taking the photo, and definitely family lore, not something that's got any fact based on it. Thank you for that.
Perfect. We have now a question from the chat. It's from Leslie Buchan, or Rob Ridgen. Is that how you say your last name? I hope so. It says, thanks, Carla-Jean. I was surprised to learn that so many officers had cameras, as I'm sure I'm always fascinated when you tell that story. And that the official photographs use dry plate negatives. I've got to assume that soldiers, nurses, ordinary soldiers, etc., were using sheet film, nitrate, or acetate. Was this the case? Also, do you take on private photo conservation work?
Yeah, so I'd have to, it's been a while, but basically all you ever want to do is match up the era of the camera with the era of available film. So it was my understanding that, for example, a vest pocket Kodak would be a roll of film, but I'd have to look that up for you. Either way, as you're pointing to, like nitrate, being a prevalent type of film for the era, and for those of us who don't know, nitrate is one of the most destructive types of film, as in all of the nitrate film that belongs to Library and Archives Canada is stored in a cement room at a military base. Like it can light on fire so easily. So we do want to be really careful of that. So if you think that you have nitrate film in your collection, doing things like searching out what was probably the right camera that they had, and therefore what was the available film that they had. Thus, I could conclude that maybe it's nitrate film. So I don't quite remember that off the top of my head, but it's knowable information, which is good. In terms of private conservation work, I can definitely have a conversation with you. And so Melissa's going to send out that PDF, and it has my email address on it. So if you want to follow up, I can certainly answer questions.
Perfect. And we have Laura here.
I just wanted to put in a plug for UVic's special collections and university archives and our digital exhibit on Vimy. Carla-Jean mentioned our vault platform, and that's where we have our digitized and digital collections. But we also have another platform called Spotlight, where there are more curated presentations of our collections. And I'm just popping in the chat. Here is our Victoria de Vimy exhibit. So I just wanted to share that with folks.
And Lauren, we will definitely add the dates for the official photographers in the handout in the email. Is there any other questions from anybody? The only reason why, yes, I see a physical hand. William?
Bill Whalen, I'm with the British Columbia Regiment Museum. I have a few questions, if that's okay. Less than five. The first one got taken care of already, which is rolled up photos, which we have a lot of. Many of them are the very wide and very low in height pictures of battalions prior to going over in the First World War. So that got answered. Thanks very much. You mentioned scrapbooks. We have a number of scrapbooks get dropped off, usually by widows. And I'm assuming the best thing to do with them is not to take the photos out of them, but just to leave them in situ and conserve the scrapbook.
You know what? The best thing for the photographs and the paper in the scrapbook is technically to take it out. However, what's the best thing for the social history of the object? What's the best thing for telling stories? That's going to be completely your choice. It's a great question. So for example, I have this First World War era. This is just a photograph album that I bought on eBay. And technically, the paper that it's in is horrible for it. So I could pull all of these out and put them all into little folders. And then the fact that this photograph album existed will never be known. Like I'll sell it maybe, and no one will ever know that it ever existed. So what's the research value in that? Some museums will definitely pull those things apart, but not before digitizing it fully and even making a reproduction of it in some way. Depending on how tight the spine is on that scrapbook, you could consider something like interleaving tissue paper, but sometimes that will put way too much stress on the spine. So that's not so good. If it was me, in the collections I have worked in, I would try to preserve the scrapbook as it is and give it the best, most lovely, comfortable little bed to sit in, and see if you can preserve it. And those are also the type of things where when you have an archival maintenance plan, you point to them and say, this is the one we check on the most often, to say, like, if that's within your staff's time and schedule and everything, like if
staff, that's
stuff like
funny.
that, then let's say you're going to check on it every 5 years or something, and you're going to look in the box and say, was that decision still a good decision, or do we need to intervene? So that's a really, really hard one to know. There's no right answer for that.
I think our plan at the moment is just to leave them, because many of them are, on the front, it's Colonel Toogood's scrapbook with photos before he goes overseas, and then photos, overseas, et cetera, et cetera. So many of them are glued in, and so trying to remove the photos, you actually end up ruining them. So That's the plan. I think the plan would be to get like an acid-free box that we could place them in, and so that's the plan. So that's great. We have a number of original photographs, some of them large, that are in original frames from 100+ years ago, nice oak frames. Some of them have a little bit of condensation or water damage. We would like to copy them. Is from a historic standpoint, is the general rule leave them in their frames because they come as a package, or?
In that case, you can always, like sometimes the frame will have some paper on the back and you'll have to do sort of a nice clean cut to get the paper out. You could consider reframing in the sense that maybe if it's a matted thing, does it need a new acid-free mat? That would be very good for it. You could put a product behind it called blotting paper. So if there's any kind of, like, you're going to want to pull it apart, make sure it's dry, no more moisture, maybe a new acid-free mat, maybe backing it with something like blotting paper. If it had nails before, is there a way that you could use a non-metal fastener to get it back in the frame? Perhaps, or perhaps not. And then I always write on the back. So if I backed it up with something like blotting paper or an archival product, I'm going to write the date of when I did all that work, just in pencil, so that there's always a record. And then if you felt very compelled to keep all of the materials that came out of it, like original backing paper or like an original mat, and you would label those and store them somewhere if you have the capacity again to do that, or if you're like, nope, that's no longer of any kind of research value or social value to this object, then you can, it depends on the policies of your archive, right? But yeah.
I mean, we're developing the policies of our archive. I think that's part of the reason for attending today. No, that's excellent, because we really didn't know what to do with them. So now if we remove them, we digitize them, when we put them back, we can replace anything that was causing them damage and try to keep the original oak frame, and then you get, you know, cake and eat it too on that one. So, okay,
sure.
Great. And getting back to writing on the backs of photographs, any recommendations for what to use and whether to do it or not?
A lot of archives will do it, and just with pencil, any kind of intervention we do, we just need to make sure it's reversible. We can reverse pencil usually. And so you want it always to be in a uniform location if you can, like back, bottom, right, let's say. And you know, nice, neat writing, so nobody has to go back and do it again. But it's clear so you can see it, and that say accession number or something is going to be visible for a long time. But it's not unusual for different archives to just choose to use pencil on the back of a photographic print.
Okay, that's super. Thanks for all your help with that.
Thanks so much. Those were excellent questions.
That's a great workshop today, Carla-Jean, and I'd like to thank everybody for their questions. I'd like to remind folks who are here, who are working at a community archives, that in 2025, we'll see again another call for the Terry Rexton Memorial Fund. This is an award of two $2,000 amounts for projects that help you improve access to your collections. So please do keep an eye out for that. That will be sort of late spring, early summer of 2025. Oh, and Carla-Jean has something. Oh, a question here. There was a last question about a filmmaker, an official Canadian War filmmaker. Carla-Jean, is that right? Are you responding to that question?
Yeah, yes, I just wanted to answer that question. I don't really know anything about motion picture film of the war, but if anyone's interested, Tim Cook has an article called Documenting War and Forging Reputations, or it's also a chapter in his book, Cleo's Warriors. So I think the film program is only mentioned just very briefly in that work, but if you wanted to learn more, that's where I would look.
Sorry, I jumped ahead in wrapping things up. Are there any more questions? If there are not, thank you for coming.